So what I'm going to talk to you guys about is really about three things, and really about how we achieve massive success over the last 12, 18 months. And that's about these three key tenets. It's about focus, precision, and scale. And I just decided to throw in this picture of Kai Green, who's like one of our biggest ambassadors, and a bit of the face of Ryderwear, because that's what he's about too, as you can obviously tell from the picture. But I also want to talk to you about one of my favourite marketing slides, and I hope that anyone here who's been in marketing for a while has seen this, which is one of the most famous charts in production from Les Binet and Peter Field, who are two marketing professors, which shows the difference between when you do sales promotions versus brand building. What you see on the yellow line there is what a lot of companies, particularly in the e-commerce space, kind of get stuck into, where they end up doing a lot of sales promotions. All they focus on is sale, 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 sale. And you see there with the yellow line, you get that big spike when you do a big sale, but then as soon as the sale stops, everything sort of drops back down, more or less to where they were before. And you keep going on and on and on with this. And what happens here is that when a business lacks discipline to actually see it through, this is what they end up caught in. They end up caught in a cycle of just doing sale after sale after sale. In comparison, what the red line is what happens when a business aims to just focus on building a brand. They don't necessarily not do sales, but they're less reliant on sales. But what you see from that is that over time, that red line will grow beyond that yellow line. And what you end up with is a more sustainable brand, a brand with a much more sustainable model. And there's a short-term effect there. Well, yes, there's a 6-month period where the sales approach is going to generate more revenue, but if you stick to your guns and just focus on building a brand, you can see that long-term effect there. And the reason why I show you that is because that's what Rideaware did. So Rideaware has been around for 11 years now. This is our 11th year. But this only goes back to 2015. But you can see there at the very start of that, it's very slow. Like the growth which we had, it was nice growth, it was nice consistent growth, but it was nowhere near what some of our other competitor brands, like Gymshark, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, Do You Even, Muscle Nation, the sort of growth they had over that period. And a lot of that was for the fact that throughout the better part of the decade, Rideaware was caught on the treadmill of sales. There was a lot of sales, a lot of promotions, and really not a whole lot of focus on brand. But then around that middle of the chart there, around 2018, 2019, was when we actually started to think about who we are. Who do we stand for? And more importantly, who are we not for as well? So as a brand, what's our purpose? What's our meaning? Why should people, become a Rideaware customer? And that really started to take shape, in 2019. And from what you see there on the right part of that chart, where that growth has just gone, has up and to the right, that hockey stick growth, which we're starting to see now. Yes, there are those spikes from the Black Fridays and the Easter sales, etc., but really that baseline has lifted quite substantially now. So where we were in 2019 is that we were a $17 million business. Now, last year we did 42 mil, and this year we're on track to do about 69 to 70 million. So still amazing growth through that period. And a lot of that is driven because we know who we are and we know what our brand is. So Rideaware also through this period as well, while we're an Adelaide brand, we're an Adelaide owned and operated brand, everything is designed here, we sell globally. This is just a bit of a snapshot of where our customer base is. And I'll tell you a little about what this one is versus a Google Analytics slide where it's more just like you see a bit of heat map. We sell to 173 countries around the world. Our biggest markets are Australia, US, and the UK, but literally every other country. I look through the list sometimes and I'm just amazed by these random countries I've barely even heard of, which buy from us. And you've got customers there who buy from us every month. But what this chart shows is the importance of a large part of the Rideaware strategy, which has been influencer marketing. So what this shows with the blue dots and the red houses, is the proximity of an influencer to where there's a cluster of customers. What has really driven our growth and why we grew so quickly in the US and the UK in particular is because we focused on actually setting up influencers there. Actually reaching out to influencers, who while they had a global presence, were also hugely influential in their local market as well. And we were able to quickly see that where there's an influencer, you're going to get a cluster of customers. And where there's a really dense population of influencers, there's an even bigger cluster of customers. So in the US, where you can see there's that huge chunk there of like the blue and red dots, you've got some real cities, you've got some cities there like Phoenix, LA, Dallas, and New York, and Miami, where we have a lot of influencers. No coincidence that they're also our biggest US markets. So that has been a part of our strategy, unintentionally so, as we've actually started to, as to how we've grown globally. Now, as we further expand to the EU, we've now got a really strong focus on identifying, recruiting, and signing up influencers in European markets. So in the last 12 months, we've also opened up a US and UK warehouse. What this has meant is that our US customers and UK customers are able to get their products much faster than they did before. But in the UK, pre-Brexit, also allowed us to service the entire European market much better as well. So what we've done over the last 6 months in particular is really start to identify and scout European influencers, which has also led to a big growth in our European market as well. Interestingly enough, Germany is probably the third biggest e-commerce consumer in the world. They spend more on e-com than many other countries in the world. So that, for us moving forward, is a big part of our strategy. And something which, for any brand looking to grow globally, is looking at, particularly for the consumer market, is what's your influencer strategy? If you are going in there, don't be shy to go out there and recruit and find influencers in those markets you're trying to expand to. But a big part of what we did in the last 12 months is really understand who our tribes are. Like I mentioned before, not just who we are, but also who we're not for as well. If you go back to the earlier slide I showed you with that chart, around 2017, 2018, when Rideaware's history isn't bodybuilding, really like Kai Green who you saw before, but people who would compete in competitions like like the WBFF, Mr. Olympia, those competitions like that. But around 2017, we started to lose our way a little bit. We started going into track, we started going into yoga, we started going into all these other sports, and we really lost that identity of who we are. But it also was confusing to our customers who had known us historically as a bodybuilding brand, as a weightlifting brand, was something like, hang on, are you really for me anymore? So what we did, particularly in the 2019-2020, is refocus on who our tribes are. Not so much who our personas are or who our customers, but really focusing on who's the tribe. Who are the tribe of people who, when they look at Rideaware, they know that we're the brand for them. And a lot of that was going back to our roots in lifting. Not being so much for hardcore bodybuilding anymore, but more about lifting and strength training. Anyone who is going to the gym to put on muscle for their mental health or their physical health and their overall well-being, we wanted to be the brand for them. Because knowing our tribe suddenly allowed us to then create a whole content strategy around that in terms of the advertising we were putting out, our social posts, our blogs, everything which we did, each different touch point, suddenly became much more than just about, putting people who look good in the outfits, but actually, how do we actually inspire people? How do we actually talk to people in our tribes? And what we identified was that our tribes were two tribes, really. One is what we term now the Gains Girl and also the Gains Guy, but then also the Warrior Women and the Warrior Men. So the Gains Girl and Gains Guy, like it sounds, the people who go to the gym because they want to lift. They go to the gym because they want to lift and build muscle and look good as well. And going to the gym for them is just part of who they are. And then the warriors, they're ones who go there because of the discipline around it. They go there because they love getting up at 5 a.m. and just smashing their targets, smashing their goals. If they want to lift heavier, they want to lift more, they want to push themselves to the absolute limit. Knowing those two tribes, it then changed our whole approach to how we were going to market with them. It changed the language which we were using. It changed the types of ads we will put out. It also changed our targeting. Where Ryan was talking before about targeting in your Facebook ads, our targeting when I joined in 2018 was extremely broad. We were pretty much looking for anyone who was interested in buying activewear. Whether they were looking at Lululemon or Nike or Gymshark or anything like that. We didn't really care. If you were looking for activewear, we were targeting you. What we did was actually focus that and bring that focus back on who are our tribes, and making sure that our targeting was only speaking to those people. So we were minimizing the amount of waste. Through that, we were able to get our creative to be much more effective and to work much harder for us than it ever had before. So just purely from a ROAS level, which is the return on advertising spend, that went through the roof just by able to be targeting a little bit better who we were speaking to. But the other thing which worked well in our favor as well last year was how we responded to the pandemic. Every business was affected by it, as you all know. And what they talk about is that it's a K-shaped recovery from that, where you had some business who sloped down, who did very poorly, but then there were some businesses who did extremely well from that. Rideaware was very fortunate in that we were in one of those businesses who did very well, because suddenly health and fitness, that self-care became top of mind. So while everyone was pivoting and trying to do that, we were already in that space. But what we need to do was make sure that what our content still resonated through that as well. One thing I'm particularly proud of, which we did, is our pandemic response. Because when the pandemic hit, we were a very gym-focused brand. Everything which we did was in the gym. All we did was show people in the gym, lifting, doing deadlifts, squats, bench press, whatever it was. All our YouTube videos were nothing but, how to do, a proper bicep, curl. Talking about all these techniques to help people level up the game at the gym. So what happens when the gym closes? We very quickly were able to pivot everything which we did. We changed all our ads, got all our local influencers, reached out to all our athletes around the world, and actually got them to shoot content for us. Actually invited them to create content to replace all our gym content in the ads. So we were able to do that very quickly and start pumping out a lot of home workout stuff. Stuff to help people look after themselves at home. We were doing things like live, IG live workouts, home workouts with a lot of our top athletes. We ran a 2-week series where every day we had athletes doing workouts. It had thousands of people following along around the world. We were putting out ebooks. We were putting out a lot of content to help people through this period. We also managed to source booty bands and resistance bands very quickly, which sold out like that. We thought we'd have enough for months. They sold out within a week. But very quickly, we were able to pivot and make sure that we stayed top of mind. And a lot of that with any brand, particularly now, is to understand what you need to do to remain relevant and topical. If we had persisted with the gym approach, people would have tuned out. Our customers would have tuned out. We would have got no traction in the market. But by quickly pivoting towards home workouts and understanding what the market actually wanted and where things were heading, we were able and still continue to remain relevant now. So even as gyms have reopened now, we continue to have diversified content which we put out there, which isn't just about the gym, but also with how attitudes towards strength training and fitness have changed as well. We also continue to evolve there as well. One of the big trends which have emerged from the gym is that with all the gyms closing, 30% of people who used to have gym memberships have now said with gyms reopening, they don't intend to join a gym again. They've either got home workout setups or they're just looking to diversify and do other things instead. So we need to think about how do we stay relevant there as well. By making sure that all we're putting out, we don't just go back and do things as they were, but we adapt. We adapt to what the world looks like now and will look like in 12 to 18 months and longer. So Ryan talked about this before, and this has been a really key part of our journey as well, and something which I'm super passionate about, which is about the power of data. Every single business collects an absolute mountain of data. More data than you could ever conceive of. But the majority of business, that data is dark data, meaning it just sits there and you never use it, and you don't know how to leverage it. For e-commerce businesses, you think about all the different platforms which you're using. We have Shopify, we have Google Ads, Facebook Ads, all these different tools which we're using, and all are collecting data. Even Google Analytics as well. But most of the time, we're reporting that data in isolation. We're not actually figuring out what's the insight from that data. How can we actually use that data to better understand our customers? So a big part of our growth has really been through our data strategy and really unlocking the power of our data by looking at our customer base and really understanding who is buying what. one of the big things we identified when I joined was that a lot of our marketing was focused on existing customers, particularly in e-commerce. Are there anyone who works in e-commerce here? Just curiously? Yep. Cool. You probably know that the importance is that you need to look at not just how many new customers, but also retention as well. And it's also the whole thing about it's cheaper to retain a customer than acquire a new customer. But the problem is all you do is market to your existing customers. Eventually, you're not going to be filling the funnel with anything, and you're going to run out of customers. And that was what I saw at Ryderwear. By looking at the data and looking at who was buying, we were heavily focusing on existing customers, just marketing to the same people over and over again, and we weren't going out there and prospecting and finding new customers. But that was only possible by looking at the data, looking at the behavior of who was actually buying our data, who was actually buying our products, and starting to segment them, and understanding the differences between a shoe customer versus a more traditional bodybuilding customer versus one of the warrior women who may only be buying certain styles. But also looking at the lifetime value as well from each different channel we were looking at. So we could actually start to prioritize where we actually wanted to focus more of our efforts in. At Rideaware, like I talked about before, a big focus for us is our influencer marketing strategy. Also looking at which influencers drive the most return from us, either through traffic to the website or usages of their discount code. By analysing some of that data, we were able to make smarter decisions about which influencers to retain versus which influencers to let go of. Particularly when you have a paid influencer strategy, that can really add up over time, where you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for influencers. So you really need to understand what value they're trying to drive as well. When I joined, we only looked at influencers through the lens of how many times did their code get used. But by looking at other analytics, particularly around how many times their posts get seen when they post about Rideaware and how engaged people are with that post, we're able to start to flip the narrative around how we looked at influencers. So we didn't just look at influencers purely from a revenue perspective, but also from a reach and engagement perspective as well. And from that, an influencer who we would normally cut because they had no one using their code, we actually started to keep on because we realized the value of the influencers wasn't in how many times their code got used, but in how engaged their followers were with the content they were putting out about us. So that really started to change a lot of what we did. But then also looking at in terms of a product strategy as well, looking at which products are selling. Which products are selling at full price versus which products need to move into discount as well. By unlocking that data and seeing, what's the sell-through rate of products, at launch, over their lifetime, during sale periods and off-sale periods, we were able to start making really informed decisions, about what we then went on to order, which colours we went on to order, which styles we went on to order, but then also which markets we started to funnel more products towards as well. And then also looking at, through our website as well, understanding more about, what's behaviour on our website. How are people using the website? Are there certain sections, which anyone already has access to in Google Analytics? But one thing as well which we did was to tie all that together. Because a lot of this data lives in isolation, lives in its own silo. You've got your Facebook data here, your Google Analytics here, your Shopify data here. What we did was that we created a data warehouse as well. We found a way to actually pull all that data from all these different sources and build pipelines into a data warehouse. Once the data is in that data warehouse, we were then able to put a BI layer over the top of it, so a business intelligence layer, which allowed us to actually analyze and report back and pull out real insights from that data. To be able to understand how that joins up between different, all those different sources. Looking at the trends you're seeing between something which happens at Facebook versus something which happens at Shopify, versus something which happens on a product level. To be able to see what all those movements are. But again, you need to be able to pull that all together. You can't just look at the data in isolation within those platforms. So another one, following on from what Ryan talked about, is the importance then of being able to leverage that data, to personalize our marketing. So a big part of this is once you have the data, is then figuring out how to unlock it. Like Rebecca mentioned before, I've been in a number of places before and have worked at a number of places to implement marketing automation platforms, from ExactTarget, which is now owned by Salesforce, to HubSpot, to Marketo, and now recently one called Ecommerce. So I've also worked at Klaviyo as well. The one thing which you need across any of these platforms is data. If you don't have the proper data to put in it, and if your data isn't clean, it's not going to be able to be very useful for you. What we did after we were able to clean up our data, to dedupe customers across each site, to get rid of, all the dirty data which was polluting our data sets, was to then find a tool which was able to help us then leverage the insights which was being found there. With all these platforms out there, there's so much power which you can unlock, particularly through automation as well, and also automation and personalizing things at scale. One of the projects we undertook last year was to implement Ecommerce. Ecommerce is a marketing automation platform designed specifically for e-commerce, in particular fashion. While it does everything which all the other tools do on the box, sends emails, it sends SMSs, it allows you to personalize the website, does all these things, what sits at the core of it is this amazing CDP, customer data platform, where we actually feed in all the data from all these different sources, and then it pulls out those insights and starts to understand more about what products someone is most likely to buy. The machine learns and understands that someone who buys the black Ryderwear hoodie is also most likely to buy these other products as well. And then allows us to then take that data and put that into our messaging, into our communications across all our different touch points. So what we did recently through Ecommerce was to really start personalizing the customer journey, so that when a customer subscribes and buys from us, in the emails we send them, we're not just personalizing it by saying, hello, name, and your country or whatever else. We're actually personalizing it with recommendations of things which we know that which we think they're likely to buy. By doing that, that significantly has increased the revenue we're generating from all our different touch points, in particular email. Our email revenue has increased 40% in the last 3 months simply by implementing recommendations on there. That's allowing us to scale, to do this personalization at scale, which is then adding to the bottom line. But in addition to that, by actually having a marketing automation stack too through Ecommerce, it also allows us to personalize the customer experience. So someone who visits, a new customer who we've never seen before who visits the website, versus someone who's been on the website multiple times and buys from us every month, they get vastly different customer experiences. They see different images, they see different banners on the site. So what I mean by that is that someone who arrives at the site the first time, and they get that pop-up of, hey, welcome to the site, sign up, we're going to give you a discount code. If they sign up and get the code and they never use it, we still retarget them. So through Facebook, we will still retarget them on different platforms to remind them that they have that code to use. And when they arrive at the site, that code is there for them to use again. We are prompting them again to use that code. So we're constantly reminding people about those different offers. But also through the power of the data which we have, we're also starting to segment our lists as well to understand who are our loyal customers, but then also who are defecting customers and churn customers. So what I mean by that is, with every business, you've got a life cycle of a customer, where if someone doesn't buy from you within a certain amount of time, you're likely to have lost them as a customer. For an apparel business, particularly in the activewear space, that's about 90 days. If someone doesn't buy from you every 90 days, they're most likely to defect and have gone on to another brand. So we now have different tactics which we put in place to ensure that people never reach that point. Or if they start to reach that point, we are targeting them more aggressively. Or we are looking at other ways to get in their inbox to stay relevant and top of mind for them, to hopefully push them towards another purchase so that they stay as a loyal Rideaware customer. And we're doing that across multiple touch points, because it's not just through email, but it's also through our website, and it's also through SMS, and it's also through the ads we're putting out there as well, to make sure that is as personalized and really relevant towards that customer as possible. While we're still fairly early on in this journey as well, the other things we're looking at now is to understand more about who our customers are in terms of where do they train. Do they do more HIIT training at F45, or are they more gym-based and lifting weights? Are they more into it for strength training, or are they bodybuilding? We're starting to build up a richer profile of a customer as well, based on going out and surveying them, asking them questions to help fill out their profile, so that we can actually start to then serve them more relevant content. So that rather than show everyone Kai Green, we can show them an athlete, or exercises or activity which is more relevant and more related to what they're interested in as well. And yesterday we kicked off our Rideaware loyalty program as well, which in the first day has 4,000 plus members. which has been a bit of a journey as well, and a bit of a game changer for us, to make sure we now have an automated program in place to try to nurture customers and ensure that we are keeping them on as loyal Rideaware customers, and obviously encourage them to purchase from us more as well. And because there was a question at the back there earlier on about tech stacks, when Ryan called me out before, I was actually pasting this into the deck, which is a picture of what our tech stack looks like at Rideaware. When I joined, one of the things which we had was that we had a lot of tools, and we didn't really understand where the tools sat in the stack. Matter of fact, if you asked anyone what the tech stack looked like, no one could have actually answered that question for you. And the reason why is because every single tool was all about, getting the tool because I've got this problem, so we need to fix it. So we're going to get this tool to fix that problem. So it ended up as being this whole jumbled mess of where everything sat, and also where ownership of those different tools sat as well. So what we did was actually start to understand what role which part of the customer journey each tool fit in, and then started to cluster them together, and then started to look at all the relationships each one had between each other as well. So we knew what each one was meant for. So what you can see in this diagram here is that everything revolves around Shopify. Shopify is it's our everything. That's where we transact, that's where we do all our commerce. So everything in some way, shape or form connects back to Shopify. But then you can see where all the analytics platforms, the performance platforms, even our inventory management, what that relationship looks like between all of them, so we can understand better how we can leverage the data across each platform as well. This also translated to how we've actually restructured the organization as well, because the most important thing through all this is making sure you have the right team to support any growth as well. There's no point having the best tools in the world if you don't have the team to support it. And one of the major achievements which I've done over this in the last 18 months is looking at how do we actually restructure the team. We've taken the team on a journey from being a very flat marketing structure with one senior marketer and everyone reporting into them, to then having different teams, to having a brand team, an e-commerce team, a performance team, and a creative team as well. So that everyone understands what's the relationship between that. Actually putting in systems and processes and frameworks so that every team and every individual understands what they're accountable for. So we can actually operate this at scale and perform even faster than before. In addition to that as well, is making sure we have those relationships across all the different teams, including customer experience, operations, warehouse, so it's a seamless operation. And while we're still very early on in that journey, I feel very confidently about the fact that what we're building is a brand and a company which is built for scale and growth over the next few years. So that's all I have for you today. Any questions? Wow, okay. I think that one...
Hi, Mal. I'm Jacqueline Thorne here. Now, shout out to Rubina for just the speakers one after the other have really built on the knowledge, which is fantastic. Mal, I had two questions for you. First of all, fantastic that you're doing data-driven insights. I think that's just a no-brainer, and it's great to see in practical terms the value it's actually made to the bottom line. Secondly, just walk me through again, is it just semantics, the difference between a tribe and a persona? Like the warrior women, is that a tribe or a persona, or is tribes more the group of people, and the persona, it's a persona group, for example?
Great question, because we struggled with that as well. I come from like a digital product world, so we did everything by personas, but what we found, because when I joined, the first thing I did was that we started to actually build personas. What we found was that personas were way too limiting. Like everyone got so laser focused on that persona that from a design and a marketing and a brand activation level, we were so focused on what that specific, what Michael, the 36-year-old bodybuilder wanted. So we actually zoomed out and went, okay, what's actually going to be more relevant for us? Which is when we focused on the group, on the tribe. So great question, thank you.
If any of you haven't read it yet, I do recommend that you pick up a copy of Seth Godin's Tribes, which I think that kind of draws on and really does explain further that whole concept. It really is geared around a very simple mantra of people like us do things like this. So if you haven't read it, add it to your reading list. I did pop a link in Twitter, so hopefully you guys can see that. I think there were some more questions. Yep. We'll go over here and then a couple over here, Ollie.
Hi Mel, Kim here. Thank you for taking my question. This is probably aimed more so at the smaller businesses or brands that are looking at the growth and scale phase. How does Rideaware manage the risk to the brand when using influencers and micro-influencers?
So what was the start of that question?
How does Ryderwear manage the risk to the brand when using influencers and micro?
That's a great question as well. Scouting and making sure that there's a really good fit as well. As you should, like rather than just reaching out to any influencer who is sort of vaguely in that space, making sure that you know as a brand what your values are and ensuring that that influencer aligns with those values too. And we've also cut plenty of influencers before. Particularly through Black Lives Matters, that was like something which was so eye-opening, just like the amount of influencers we had to cut, because like, oh my God, we had no idea you had those views. So instantly it was like, we cut them and we apologised for it. We owned it, because we got called out saying, hey, your influencer said da-da-da, and then we said, this doesn't represent who we are. So there is always going to be an element of risk in everything you do, but in terms of influencers, making sure that you act fast if there is anything there which doesn't align with what you do, but also doing your homework early up front as well.
Great. We'll nip to the back of the class because the mic's up there. And Rachel, if you can come round to the front.
Thanks for that presentation. It was really cool. My question's about influencer marketing, and would you recommend doing whitelisting and the stuff you'd actually with?
Sorry, your mic just cut out a little bit there.
So my question's about influencer marketing and whitelisting. Would you recommend doing that, or do you guys do that at Rideaware?
Yeah, so with all our influencers, like we vet them. We don't use any influencer marketing software to like we don't use Tribe or anything like that to just farm out content. We actually have an in-house program, so we've got a team which actually will scout and manage those influencers. So it's very account managed in terms of what we do. So it also arguably doesn't scale very well, but I think the results which we get significantly would outpace a platform where it's more automated.
You're going to pass it over to Will next door? Yep.
Thanks, Mal. Just a quick question about your launch strategies. So whether it's a new line of clothing or even, as you mentioned before, pivoting like in COVID, what does that look like for you in terms of preparing a launch campaign, in terms of, I guess, the content strategy you put in place, the marketing strategy to make sure that you're kind of getting the audience warmed up prior to launching?
So every campaign which we do starts off with, first of all, like what are we trying to achieve? Whether it's launching a new collection or it's a sale or something like that. From there, it gets briefed in, and then we'll develop a creative concept. So the creative team will come up with a few different concepts, and then from there they'll pick a concept. We'll approve a concept which we'll go with, and then we'll bring the other channel owners involved in there. So between the brand and digital team, all the different channel owners would come together and then flesh out what their go-to-market plan is for that. So it's a very collaborative process where we throw out a whole different bunch of ideas, how we want to activate it across different channels. What we always look for is how do we actually integrate it? It's got to be integrated. Historically it was this channel does that, this channel does that, this channel does that. But by bringing everyone together in a room, we can then get a really tight, integrated approach to it. And then from there, it's mapping out the timelines. So with most collections, actually everything we do, there's always a teaser phase, which you do about a week or so out, to try to build some hype and momentum towards the launch of a collection or a sale. And then we'll do a pre-launch and then a launch. And then depending on the length of it as well, like if it's a Black Friday, which can go for 2 to 3 weeks, there's also activity which we plan just to sustain that campaign as well. Just to make sure there's constantly interest in it, or we can at least spike some interest when things naturally start to tail off.
Cool. Can I just see the show of hands for any further questions? Ollie, maybe just come down the front. Oh, actually, and over this side, actually, and then Rachel can do this side. Yep, at the front here, Maria.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. It's fascinating to see an Adelaide brand do so well globally, so congratulations. My question is, I'm just curious to know who Rideaware sees as their main competitors, and in a market that is so cluttered with activewear brands, how you, I guess, position yourself to stand out from the rest of the crowd?
Sure. Great question as well. So in each market, we've got different competitors. But I guess overall I'll focus on Australia. So in Australia, we have our direct competitors and then more of our aspirational competitors. So in our direct competitor set, they're the ones who are kind of targeting the same tribes as us and are of a similar size to us. So of those, there's Muscle Nation and Do You Even are probably the biggest ones, and there's some smaller ones like Muscle Republic as well, because you're right, it is a really, really crowded space. But then we also look at our aspirational competitors, which are the Gymsharks and the Nikes of the world, where we look at them and we want to take inspiration from what they do, and we aspire to be them, but we know we're not them. And we know that we can't ever hope to compete head-to-head with them. So what we're focused on more is about, okay, how do we differentiate ourselves from our direct competitors, and making sure that we give people a point of difference for why they should buy Ryderwear.
Great. Ben, over to you for a question. And I think there's a couple in here, Rachel. Yep.
So being an apparel brand, and then you spoke about how there's a 30% decrease in gym members actually wanting to go back to the gym, and I've noticed you've actually opened a gym. What was the strategy behind opening a physical gym?
Great question. So many great questions. So we started doing that before COVID, so we're kind of locked in. But it actually still plays part of the strategy. What we have with Rideaware is that we are focusing on more of an ecosystem strategy, similar to how to own the vertical of that fitness space. We don't ever expect to have, one day we may have brands all around the world, but right now those gyms are that physical mecca, particularly for an e-commerce brand. It's so important for people to be able to have a way to touch and feel your brand, even if they can't necessarily be there, to actually have that physical representation. So if you think about it, this is going to sound so corny, so don't grill me for this. If you think about a religion, right? You've got like every religion has like an altar, a temple where they go to pray, where they to worship and do whatever, right?
I bow down to the god of marketing, CMO Ryderwear. No, seriously. At your feet.
But that's what the gym is. The gym is that place where if you're in the Rideaware tribe, if you're part of our tribe, it's the place where you can look to, that's your mecca, right? So that's how we view it. And we want to add things around that as well. So that's really about having that physical presence. I think it's so important for every brand to have that ability for your customers, your fans, your tribe, to be able to touch and feel and experience your brand. Gymshark do it incredibly well with their events. Like they kill events, and they go all around the world doing events, and they go crazy. It just creates so much hype and FOMO around it as well. We want to do the same with the gym.
All right, I think we'll take one last, how many questions we've got left? I think there's two. All right, we'll take these last two. Sorry, Polly and Dina, that we're going to be running a little bit late, and sorry, we'll be running late into lunch.
Thanks again for the presentation. Really interesting to hear from you. I guess my question, I wanted to drill down a little bit more into what you spoke about. One of the questions about whitelisting your influencers, because I know you spoke about doing your homework, and also how you had a team scouting influencers as well. We personally just started to venture into the world of influencer marketing, and we actually had a really bad experience. We thought we found an influencer that was a great fit for our personas. The numbers look really good. So I suppose I wanted to know a little bit more about that process for doing your homework in your team with the scouting, because I know you spoke about the reach and engagement playing a larger part rather than just being the revenue and the numbers. Yep. How do you translate that reach and engagement and actually quantify that? Because all influencers, I suppose, are always going to say they've got reach and engagement. So how are you actually getting that? And
do I have an answer for you? Cool. Sorry to cut you off. There's a tool which is probably one of my favourite apps at the moment. Is one called LoudCrowd. I don't get commission for these guys, but I'm going to tell Gary that I talked about it. Gary's the founder. So LoudCrowd is an influencer management tool which will allow you to create lists and audiences of the influencers in your book, in your portfolio, and then you add your hashtags in there as well. So every one of our influencers, when they post to us on Instagram, stories, YouTube, whatever, they have to use a hashtag. Their software connects with Facebook, Instagram, YouTube APIs to actually look at the reach and the number of impressions and the engagement on posts from those influencers which tag you. So that's how we do it. So we can actually then see the metrics they're telling us is like, great, cool. And then we can very, very quickly see whether they're bullshitting us or not. So that's how we do it.
LoudCrowd.
LoudCrowd.
I'll drop a link in the Slack community. That's a really valuable tool.
Wait for me to get my affiliate link first.
Sorry, I'll wait for Mal's affiliate link, but yeah, LoudCrowd. We've got one last question, I think, here.
Yes,
Senna?
yes, yeah, thanks, Robina. Thanks, Mal. from one data analyst to another, such an impressive effort in building in-house analytics team. So I was wondering if you could give a couple of tips on other businesses going through this process and a little bit of the journey and how to make it easier, because it sounds like a mammoth effort.
It is. It's a huge effort. And look, the nature of Rideaware, because of how it's growing, we were hacking things together. We were extracting things from different platforms, pulling into Google Sheets, and then doing all this manual reporting and this manual analysis on it. And really, what brought it to a head was that a whole bunch of the Google Sheets just broke. And it was just like we could not cut any more columns from it. It was like, well, if we delete any more columns, we're just not going to do anything. It was like, well, we can't remove rows, we can't see back that far. And it was just like, well, if we want the reporting, it was just basically an easy conversation with the CEO. If we want to keep reporting on this, we need to invest in it, which then allowed us to then put together a data strategy to look at all those different sources and then look at the efficiencies around that as well. Like the amount of time, it was me going out to, there were about 4 or 5 of us within the business who were heavily in Google Sheets and Excel, pulling out these reports and calculating how much time everyone was spending each week and going, well, if we move to this, the sticker price is pretty big, but the saving is this. We were literally getting 1.5 more people back by investing in this.
Can I ask what data warehouse you use, or data or visualization tool, or whatever? Yeah.
So we use Panoply. So Panoply is our data warehouse. That's Panoply. The reason why we went to Panoply is because it's a managed data warehouse, meaning that you just need to connect all the different sources, and then they do the rest. Whereas if you use Redshift or something like that, there's a hell of a lot of manual setup. And we only have one developer. Being an e-commerce business, we only have one dev, which is remarkable. So we didn't have the resources to properly build those pipelines ourselves. So we went to Panoply, who helped us do that for us. And on top of that, we use Tableau. Yeah. So Tableau for all our BI and visualization. So we have dozens and dozens of reports running off Tableau, and executive dashboards, marketing dashboards, which are all updated in real time. So we can easily see, even when we go back to the influencer question, as soon as we on board a new influencer and we add their handle in there, we start pulling in analytics straight away in terms of the performance, how much traffic they drive to the website, how many sales they're driving, and then over time, Loudcrowd doesn't have an API yet, but that will then start feeding into there as well. So you can imagine how powerful that is when those insights are just there, rather than having to go and hunt for them.
Yeah, I got to say, in our work, we use Databox as our data visualization tool of choice, but yeah, it's an absolute game changer when you're not actually having to search for the data. You're just presented with the graph and you're like, oh, what happened on that day? I better go find out, because there's a massive dip in conversions or whatever. So on that note, I'd like to thank Chia for his time, and lovely little one for you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.